Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday's episode of Trending. It's great to be with you. I feel like I've not been sat here for ages. Rich is on the other side of the country in a land much nicer than this one. How you doing, mate?
I'm all good, thank you. It's not land down under, but we'll come to that later.
It's much nicer than this one, mate. It's much nicer than this one.
Yeah.
So, Gaz has just said before we've jumped on air about this new strain of COVID that is apparently hospitalising people and causing chaos over in China just a few days after the quite highly debated and quite highly skepticized pandemic treaty has gone through. Do you think that's a coincidence, mate? Do you think this is something that we're going to start to see more and more of in the coming days and weeks?
I don't think any of it is a coincidence, is it? And also, all of it, even if it was a coincidence, it could be used and weaponized, which is something we kind of try and point out regularly, that it all can be weaponized and used however which way they want. So if it was a coincidence, which I highly doubt it, they can still use it for whatever aims they want because the agenda and the end goal doesn't change. So it'd be a very interesting one to keep ahead of. But obviously, how far have we come down this COVID nonsense to realise that it's nonsense?
Yeah, I feel like they put stories out every now and again just to keep people talking about it, to be honest. And maybe we're falling for it, but I still think it's important to highlight. And for those of you that haven't looked into the pandemic treaty, I urge you to take a good look at that because it's quite a terrifying read, I have to say. But right, we're going to head over to the UK. Head back to the UK and talk about one of the biggest stories that was breaking yesterday to do with Tommy Robinson being released from prison. So what have you got on this one, mate?
Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting one. Obviously, I'd like to foreshadow this by saying Tommy, I don't think should have been in prison for this specific reason at all. This isn't anything against him, but it's very important that we look at this from every single angle. Obviously, we've had him in the Iconic Studios to talk about his side of things, and we do look at things across the board. So he's released from prison. He comes out and he talks about mega. Now, this is something that me and Gaz were talking about and coined the phrase mega. So make England great again on the podcast, on WhatsApp podcast. I very much doubt he listens to the WhatsApp podcast, but he may well do because he's got a hat with mega on it. But that was a sideline. The main interesting thing for me was that he come out and he's organised another event. You'd have thought take some time off, Tommy. It's, you just got out there, have a shave. But he's also wearing a Christian or Catholic cross. I found very interesting, especially in light that the likes of Russell Brand have joined the Christian, I would say, in there with Trump. You would call him a Christian Zionist, I would. And all of the kind of right-wing alternative media, I just wonder if this is a precursor to him being joined in with those lot, because that's a different thing that I noticed. And it was front and centre, very proudly wearing it. And I don't believe he had a religious belief. I know he's very much against Islam, but in terms of actually being religious before, I'm not sure if he actually had a religion when he went in, but he's certainly wearing a Catholic or Christian cross now.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be a prerequisite these days of speaking on these topics, is that you have to be a Christian, you have to be a Catholic, when, the whole point of the alternative media was that it saw above the divisional lines of politics, of religion, of things like that. If people want to follow a religion, that's absolutely fine. That's their prerogative and that's their right. That's freedom. But then imposing that and then using that and seeing everything in the world through that lens of whatever religion you are, that's part of the problem. That's what we see around the world. That's why how many wars have started because of religious beliefs? How many division between people is because of different religious beliefs? And I think if you're essentially as an alternative media just doing the same thing, you're falling for it. And I also think, we've spoke about this in the past, and I've had these conversations with Gareth and my dad, that because Christianity is seen as the religion of the West, one of the ways that people that talk about immigration changing the Western societies, one of the ways they seem to want to counteract that is to go back to the old school religions of the West, because they see that as like a constant. They see that as a large, thing that Western society was built upon. I mean, around where you live, Rich, every tiny little village with 5 houses has a massive church that imposes, on the village. So therefore, the influence of the church in this country was a lot bigger than it is today. And I wonder if that's part of people's mindset as well. That's why a lot of the so-called patriots and Britain First type people are looking back to things like Christianity and Catholicism, because they obviously go way back through British society. You go back to learning about Henry VIII and his 7 wives, 6 wives and all that in school. And it was about his arguments with the church and how Protestants were created and stuff like that. There was no talk of Islam in that period, but there was of those religions. And I wonder if that's part of it as well with people.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think what they're doing is if you want to set up the polarities, you need to bring back one of the poles of that polarity that has kind of fallen for a while. And we have this Rome has fallen, and we've been speaking on the Classified show and also on Trending that the Roman Empire has been built back up to fall again. Now, the biblical texts, and I'm not religious in any way, shape or form, but they are interesting to study when you believe, as I do, that they're playing these things out. Rome is supposed to fall twice. It falls twice. I think it says Babylon has fallen or Rome has fallen, depending on what version you read. That would have to be built up again to fall again in this narrative. Now, we know that Tommy Robinson is very much pro-Israel, pro-Zionist. So, in my opinion, it makes sense to think that this is a Christian Zionist. And they don't meld at the very end of this end times. They do not. The Christians are led to be the scapegoats. And if you put everything together, it says that this is a movement to bring up the Christians to be the scapegoats for what Israel are doing in the Middle East. And I can't see any other way around it. And I won't put it any other way because that's clearly, to me, what is happening. So this whole make England great again is part of this, bringing Christianity up of the West, bringing the religious side of it up for it to fall again, because it's being led by a Pied Piper like Trump, who is clearly in the arms of Israel and this messianic nonsense that we keep going on about, because it's very interesting. But to see Tommy come out with a Christian cross and then knowing that he's very, very pro-Israel, the pieces just fit in the puzzle quite easily there.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting one to see how it unfolds in the coming days and weeks with what he does and the types of things that he's involved in. So we're going to move on to another story. Now, this story I'd not heard about, I have to say. It happened in April originally, but there's more and more coming out about it every single day. But my wife pointed this out to me last night. So this is the headline. It is from today, this particular update. Turkish officials have no idea how British mother's heart went missing in hospital after she died on holiday, fueling growing suspicion. So for context, for people that don't know this story, essentially a family went over to Turkey from the UK on holiday, a family from Portsmouth. The lady's name is Beth Martin. She's 28. She fell ill during the flight. When they got there, she didn't feel great. She thought it was food poisoning, something like that. She went to a local hospital. They kept her in overnight. Initially, when she fell ill, local Turkish police, when they were called after she had sadly passed away, they originally suspected the husband and arrested the husband in front of their children on the premise that he had poisoned her. And they've been, basically the family are saying that they've been kept in the dark about the seriousness of her condition. They left her overnight in the hospital. When they went back the next day, she died. They weren't told. They weren't informed of anything. Then the husband's arrested. They've had a nightmare with the Turkish authorities trying to get a cause of death, trying to understand exactly what has happened. The Turkish authorities have then said it was heart failure, cardiac arrest caused by multiple organ failure. They've got her body back to the UK to do an autopsy, and her heart's not in her body when it's got back to the UK. Now, I don't even want to, there's various things to unpack here. I don't even want to comprehend how the family must be feeling right now, that they've gone on a family holiday to somewhere sunny and mum's not come home. And not only that, you've had to fight to get her home. And when you've got her home, she's not got a heart in her body. What her husband and her parents who were on the holiday with them and their 2 young children must be feeling now is something I can't even imagine. The pain and the anger and all the questions that you would have and all the things that would be racing around your mind of what has gone on here. And then you got the other aspect of it, which is there's clearly some kind of organ trafficking, organ harvesting going on here. And countries where, people go on holiday and people think they're safe and people think they're going to go and have a great time. There's also a very dark, sinister underbelly to them. Countries like Turkey would be one. Egypt would probably be another one, where lots of people go on holiday from different parts of Europe and a lot go from the UK. And this, when I looked into this last night after I was told about it, this isn't the only story like this you find. You find lots of stories of similar cases, not quite necessarily as extreme as this one, but cases where people go into hospital with something very routine and all of a sudden complications, and it's not quite so black and white and routine that they're going to be okay. And also stories where people that have fell ill and sadly died while on trips to places like Turkey. The local authorities have been very obstructive with families trying to get the bodies back, trying to ask questions about what's happened to their loved ones. This, to me, I think the reason this is important to raise is because there'll be people going on holiday to Turkey and other places today. There'll be people going tomorrow. There'll be people going next week from the UK and people watching this show. And I think it's important to have your eyes open when you go to places like this, that these sort of things go on, and to keep your wits about you. I think that's very, very important. I think the days of ignorance and thinking that everything is sunshine and rainbows and everyone's lovely and anywhere you go in the world is going to be great and they're going to look after you, those days have got to change, because they're not reality, unfortunately. I mean, what's your take on this, May? I can't really comprehend what the family must be going through at the moment.
I mean, where do you start with that? I mean, he's been arrested. Your wife and your mum has passed away. They had to, I believe, carry the body out of the hospital.
Yes, they did. I forgot to add that. Yeah, they had to carry the body out themselves.
To carry the body out of the hospital, and your wife, and then she comes back with no heart. I mean, organ trafficking, I think, is the first thing that we'd all come to, looking at, but where does these organs go? And I think that's a question that doesn't get asked to, like, where do these children go? What is going on in this underworld that keeps this system spinning around? Because we're living on the top level, literally living on the surface, but there's an underbelly of trafficking children, there's trafficking organs, and there's trafficking weapons. There's things going on that keep this world going. Money doesn't seem to make the world go round. Money is the open byproduct of something else that keeps the world go around, and it's crime. Unfortunately, it seems to be crime. And this is where we're at. So it's a scary thing to think about where that heart would have gone and for what reasons, why they're using it. Are they experimenting on hearts? They put them in other things. I mean, what are they doing with these organs? The Lucy Letby thing comes to mind. What were they doing? There's something they're hiding. The Madeleine McCann thing comes to mind with the fact that I think her father was a doctor, a medical doctor. There's something else going on here. And we need to start realizing that there is an underbelly, and it's not money that makes the world go round. Money is the receipt of something else that makes the world go round. And it's really not very nice.
No, it's not. And I think it's important to talk about. And, we can talk about the grand agendas behind why these things happen. And that's very important to do, to try and understand and stop it from continuing to happen in future to other people. But then there's also the more human level, that there's a family that have lost a massive part of their family. There's a husband that's lost his wife. There's 2 children that have lost their mother. And the type of people that can carry out such acts and can do this sort of thing and have no emotional or conscience that stops them doing these kind of things shows how many psychopaths there really is in the world. And I think it's something that's very difficult to comprehend, and it's something that people don't want to think about. But it's not. There's not just psychopaths in positions of power pressing red buttons and bombing civilians. That's not the only psychopaths that exist. They walk among us. The type of people that work in situations where they're harvesting organs, these are psychopaths, and they have no moral compass and no moral repercussions for their actions. And I think it's a difficult situation to look at the world from that perspective, because you don't want to believe that. It would be much easier to believe, and much easier if the world was sunshine and rainbows and everyone in positions of authority wanted the best for us, and everyone running these large corporations only wanted the best for humanity, and the medical system was only there to keep us well. It would be so much easier if that was the reality, but unfortunately it's not. And as I said, when I started to look into this more last night, this is not the only story like this you will find, and it's not just Turkey. You will find this in lots of countries around the world, including Great Britain, including the United States, including New Zealand. I found stories from. So I think the days of kind of ignorance is bliss is very much over. It's very important to have wide eyes when it comes to stories like this, because they happen. You don't hear about them in the same way you hear about others, but they happen. So, right, Rich, we're going to move on to another story, which is not a particularly nice one to talk about, but yeah.
Well, it fits in with what we're saying, this underworld, this underbelly of this system going around. Yes, it's not particularly nice to talk about it, but ignoring it isn't going to stop it, is it? So we're going to have to talk about this stuff, unfortunately. Now, I've been doing a lot of research into New Mexico. It started with the Epstein stuff in Zorro Ranch and Juliet Bryant saying she woke up underground at Epstein Zorro Ranch on a laboratory table. And I was like, there's something going on in New Mexico. There's tunnels everywhere. Now, you can speculate whether this is as vast or true, but let's have a look at this. Parents allegedly kept 7 children, 7 is a Kabbalistic number, in deplorable cave while sexually assaulting them in New Mexico, underground. And this isn't the only one. I found one from 2016, which is the same sort of thing. So the Luna County, moon, NM, a mother and father allegedly kept their 7 children in deplorable conditions, forcing them to live in semi-underground caves as they sexually assaulted them. According to a press release from the 6th Judicial District Attorney's Office, investigators were first tipped off for the crime when someone reported criminal sexual activities and involving a minor at the semi-remote property when police would soon find the children. During the 4-month investigation, agents learned that the family of 9 was living on a 35-acre site in New Mexico. So it's desolate. Located in a semi-rural portion of Luna County near Deming. The release said investigation officers described it as an inhumane, squalid scene. And when you look at it, it just looks like a dumping site. It really does look like a dumping site. A dilapidated trailer, several unlivable camping trailers, broken down vehicles, boxes of rotten food, bags of trash, along with buckets located all around the property filled with human feces. The children were found in filthy conditions. They lived outside year-round, sleeping on a mattress in a semi-underground cave with tunnels from 4 to 6 feet in length, or took shelter in broken-down vehicles. There's something underground in New Mexico, and it's time we started to look at this. You've got Dulce Base there. You've got Los Alamos National Laboratory there. You've got the Trementina site there. You've got Zorro Ranch there. You've got the Trinity site there as well. You've got even the Roswell crash was there. There's something going on in this place. This is where they were testing atomic bombs. There's something going on here. And we need to start looking at this. There was something going on Epstein Island. He brought in cement trucks. I think it was 50k cement trucks to try and fill in something 3 weeks before they raided because he knew they were coming. So to leave a clue or a code on the whiteboard is total nonsense, in my opinion, because he knew they were coming 3 weeks before. I mean, why would you do that? To me, it's a red herring. But, this stuff happens. And, if there's nothing to it, fantastic, brilliant. That's fantastic. None of these bad things are happening there. But there's enough evidence to warrant an investigation into what's going on in New Mexico and with Epstein and this transhumanist stuff. And where do those organs go? Where do those children go? What is the program that they're being entered into? Because it's clearly facilitated, controlled, and contrived. There's a systematic thing going on here. It's not random. So this should be looked into, and it's not. And I find that absurd. And when you get stories like this, it just proves the point that there's something to look into. They were living underground. This isn't the only one. 2016, there's others where children were living underground in New Mexico. And I think it was Phil Schneider, whether we agree with what he was saying or not, he wrote out a map of all tunnels underneath New Mexico a long while ago. He was a guy that reportedly, according to him, worked in Dulce Base, had his fingers shot off with some aliens. It's a bit weird. But it is worth looking at. And even if there's nothing to it, you want to rule it out, don't you?
Absolutely. And I think New Mexico is one of the most sporadically populated of the US states. There's so much desert land, there's so much barren land, and so few people really to see what is going on in terms of you can get away with a lot there. There's a lot of states in America that are obviously very populated, and there's lots of major cities and towns. New Mexico really isn't one of them. Apart from El Paso, there's not really a lot else there. So there's so much space for them to get up to whatever they're getting up to. And I think what's important also to mention is that you have obviously the agenda and the psychopaths behind that, and those people who have important roles in that, like your Epsteins and whatever he was doing at Zorro Ranch in Mexico. But on the flip side, you do also just have psychopaths that have nothing to do with the agenda. They're just up to whatever they're up to because they have their own issues. And there is sometimes a difference between the two. Not necessarily everything that somebody is doing that is dark makes them part of the agenda. I'm not saying that this story you're saying, Rich, either is or isn't part of something deeper, but it isn't necessarily every single time. It might just be a very, very messed up family with some sick parents. You
absolutely agree. Yeah,
obviously stories of things over the years with similar cases, maybe not quite as extreme as that, and some of them are very much part of the agenda and connecting. You mentioned a couple of names earlier on, and some aren't. But whatever. Again, going back to the human scale of it, there's 7 children there that have suffered unthinkable abuse. And what's the status of those now? Did they get out or?
Yeah, they've been taken into care, I believe. The oldest child told police chat, or saw police, that she had been impregnated twice. Once when she was 14 and another when she was 16. The parents, 50-year-old Melvin Caudle and 41-year-old Valerie Caudle, were both arrested following the investigation. Melvin was charged with 24 counts of sexual assault and child abuse, 2 counts of criminal sexual penetration, 1 count of criminal sexual contact of a minor, and 16 counts of child abuse. So the children are obviously out of there now, and there are interviews with people that were nearby in terms of living that couldn't believe it. And as you say, this is more than likely just a very sick couple.
Yeah. But
again, why this is a trend that you'd look into. And the kids are safe now, but I mean, this has been going on for decades now.
Yeah, I can't comprehend what they've been through, and hopefully they can have some resemblance of normality in their lives from this day forward. Who knows? I can't even imagine the trauma that they must have within them. So our thoughts obviously go out to them, and hopefully they can, like I say, have some kind of normality moving forward and make something of themselves, because that would break most people, what they've been through. Because obviously your parents are the people that are there to raise you. They're people you're immediately in the your life's in their hands. They look after you, they don't look after you. That dictates a lot. And to suffer such a betrayal and such abuse at the hands of your parents, I can't even. Jeez,
you can't imagine. I mean, let's just say,
Rich, and I'm about ready to go and get a noose at that point.
Yeah, I know. Well, let's just say that the parents have denied all allegations. So I mean, they haven't been convicted yet, but it's not looking good.
No. Well, hopefully they get there. Well, I don't think there's any justice for their actions, but hopefully they get some kind of justice, those children. Right, this final story that I'm going to raise seems very irrelevant now, but given the 3 that we've discussed. But this is a story here from the UK. Thousands to get payouts over forced prepayment meter fitting. Tens of thousands of energy customers are set to receive payouts of up to £1,000 each and could see debts written off in response to a scandal over forced fitting of prepayment meters. So essentially what a prepayment meter is, for those of you that are not aware, is you pay for your gas before you even spend it. I used to have one very long time ago in a flat that I rented, where you had a little stick, you went into the shop, you put X amount of money in it, and you stuck that into the box or the meter, and it would obviously give you a little amount, and it would go down until it ran out, and then you'd have to go and do the same thing again. Now, what the energy regulator Ofcom, that's the media one, Ofgem, I should say, have done is they have done a bit of a review into the way that energy companies have been fitting these prepayment meters, and they've concluded that they've been bullying and intimidating vulnerable people into taking them when they didn't need to. And what that's led to is people getting into debt, people getting behind on payments, and so on. Because they're nice people, these energy providers, really lovely people, aren't they? So energy companies are now paying out more than £70 million in total in compensation and financial support to customers. That's not a lot, is it, Rich? 70 million when you're making, what, billions and billions and billions of profit off of doubling your prices while blaming Putin for it? I don't understand how people are so ignorant to the fact that if you make £10 million profit, let's say, and, oh, hang on, because of this war, our prices have gone up, so we're going to have to double our prices. But hang on, now you've made 20 million profit. So where's that extra cost then? Because it's costing me double, but you're making double. So you're clearly not paying double, are you? What a complete load of BS that was. Just another way of trying to break people and make people even more financially dependent upon the system. It's just disgusting. But while doing that, apparently making billions isn't enough. They have to rip off the elderly and the vulnerable. Because again, like I say, they're really lovely people. So Ofgem, I should say, seem to have actually done a good thing here in the sense of they're getting some money back for people. And the reason I think this story is important to raise and why I wanted to bring it up is because without people shouting from the rooftops, without people kicking off, and without people highlighting that they were getting ripped off by the energy providers, this wouldn't have happened. You know, the system which Ofgem is part of, it's a government organisation. They don't do us favours unless we force them. And the only reason they have pushed and allowed this payout to happen is because enough people raised the alarm, enough people raised awareness, and enough people kicked up a fuss that they had to do something and they had to react. You could apply that argument to the whole post office scandal as well. You could apply that to, vaccine compensation schemes, lots of different things. They don't do it unless they're backed into a corner and forced to do it. So after a very dark show talking about lots of very sinister subjects and very sinister stories, which are important to highlight, we can end there on something a little bit positive where people are getting something back. And it just again highlights when you highlight and kick off and you point out the things that aren't right, they do have to listen. They do have to listen.
Yeah, well, sorry to be a fart in the salad. I don't know what a better term is than that, but I just worry.
Is the saying.
I just like fart in the salad came to me in a dream.
It makes no sense.
No, it doesn't. Salads are good for you. You've ruined it. What they're going to replace those meters with, that would be my concern. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but if you've got to get rid of all those prepaid meters, what are you going to stick in there? And
probably
as well as, yeah, because they're forcing that on people now. So maybe they'll learn their lesson not to force things upon people. Let's hope, shall we? But let's keep an eye out because they're forcing smart meters on people. They're doing exactly the same thing with smart meters. So is it a case of old technology being replaced by the new? Who knows?
Possibly. And I think, it goes back to what I said a minute ago is the days of kind of blissful ignorance that people in positions of power and authority have our best interests at heart and that, they will always look after us and all of that you trust everything you are told by by someone in positions of authority. I mean, we've never been those people, but most people unfortunately are. And how many times do they need to prove to you that they will abuse that power that you give them? How many times do they need to prove to you that they don't have your best interests at heart? And I think the days of just accepting things and, a letter's come in the post, they say, I need to have this meter. Okay, fine. I'll ring up. I'll book my appointment to have it done. They need to stop now. Every single thing that happens moving forward, any event, any news story, any education, any new medical product, any food you consume, any medications you take, any new technology, all of those things, they all need to be met with skepticism and they all need to be met with, well, hang on, I'm not just going to accept that because you've told me. I'm going to ask a few questions and I'm going to find out for myself whether this is the right thing for me. That needs to be the way that we approach life and the way that we approach anything. And like I said at the top, and like you said at the top, Rich, it'd be a hell of a lot easier if it wasn't like that. It'd be a hell of a lot easier if you could just trust people. It'd be a hell of a lot easier if the politicians were genuinely there for public service and to make the lives of the people they represent better. But that's not reality. And I don't believe there's a single person alive surely now that actually genuinely believes that they do live like that they do want that. They just put the things that we see that we don't like down to incompetence and poor decisions and bad management and so on. Once you go to the next stage of actually it's not any of those things, it's actually a carefully planned and long thought out agenda, the world looks very different. And it's not necessarily something that you want to look at, but if you don't, the direction we're traveling in isn't going to change. So I think a reevaluation of what you accept, what you don't accept, and a reevaluation of the type of questions you ask when you're suggested you do this or you do that is the only way that we make any kind of change at all. Because as you know, mate, as soon as you start asking a few questions, the whole thing crumbles apart.
It does. We're in an abusive relationship. That's what it is. It's a dependent, abusive relationship with governments. And the only way that's going to stop is people push back and say no, which we do. But look at the COVID thing. 3-4 years. What I've noticed later, the trend is that let's wait until it's too late, all the damage is done, then we'll flip and pretend that, and then say, yeah, it was all really bad, and then we're going to come along and save you. That's happening a lot now. The damage is already done. They wait it out. So, this is an abusive relationship. The only way out is to walk away from them and quit acquiescing with them. So this is the only way, but it will get there. We'll definitely get there.
I completely agree, mate. I completely agree. I think some turbulent but exciting times lay ahead in terms of how we can make a massive dent in this control system that has been here for decades, probably centuries. Well, thank you very much for tuning in with us this morning. As always, the show is brought to you by the brand new range, or not so brand new range, although we do have a new flavour coming out in just a few weeks' time of Iconic Coffee. If you head over to shop.iconic.com and use the code TRENDING, you'll get 10% off. I'll be back with you in a few hours at 2 o'clock for Trending in the afternoon. Rich will be back with you tomorrow morning with Gareth. We'll see you then. Have a great Wednesday, everybody.
See you later.